are some common patterns that you've noticed with these abduction stories every time they cross your desk?
Yeah, it seems to be a mostly Caucasian phenomenon.
Characteristics be verified in a lab somewhere, like through testing, to know they've taken these things from us?
People are not taken once, usually. That's rare, actually, a single adult abduction.
So the end game is to integrate us to them?
Two white lights shining brightly into his window.
So what are they doing? Are they researching us?
You'll get these demonic presences that attack people and haunt people.
We are back for another episode. Thank you guys for joining us. Always check out what we're up to at mikecpodcast.com. We are on YouTube, we are on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. And we just appreciate the love. Click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Click that like button and just help the algorithm work with us. And we really appreciate all the support we get from you. And our guests today are no strangers to this podcast. We've had them both on before, and we had a pretty fascinating conversation. So we're really happy to have them back. They both are co-authors of the book, Who They Are and What They're Up To. And they're also the hosts of a new series on Gnostic TV called Abductions 101, UFOs and the Paranormal Connection. Please welcome back to the podcast, Leslie and Stephen Shaw.
Thank you so much.
Good morning.
What a great intro. Thank you.
No, you guys were great. We really enjoyed having you on, and I can't wait to dive into our conversation today. There's all different things happening in the news, and we're not going to get to all that today. But today I want to go into abduction stories, and I know you guys have a lot to say on this. You've researched this a ton, and I know this whole topic is still met with a lot of skepticism. I'm a former skeptic myself, so I understand that. And I want to start just by asking you both, what are some common patterns that you've noticed with these abduction stories every time they cross your desk?
Yeah, it seems to be a mostly Caucasian phenomenon. There are exceptions, but research looks at about somewhere in the low 90% range. And then it tends to run in families. It's not, people are not taken once, usually. That's rare, actually, a single adult abduction. But what happens is they tend to prey on families where they take them again and again and again, and then start taking their kids and grandkids. That happened in Stephen's family. Tell them about your background there.
Yeah, that's 4 generations. And also, too, there's the missing time aspect, too, that is also a commonality, too.
Yeah.
I started having visitations when I was 3 years of age. And it would be a being that would, jump on my chest in the middle of the night, a 2-legged being, and, kind of playfully jump on my chest and my stomach. And I just assumed it was what we called our family spirit guide called O'Glegley. And then I started to have missing time that would happen. My first one that I remember was when I was 8 years old, and I heard this strange sound in the living room, and I knew it wasn't the dog, and I was sleeping in a bunk bed on the top, and I carefully got out of the bed, and I was walking down the hallway, and I could kind of see where I was going because there was a light on the kitchen, and I remember very clearly my heart pounding, and my respiration was up, and I was literally, kind of a little scared about what I was going to see. And just as I was getting to the end of the hallway to turn right into the living room, I just blacked out. And then next thing I remember, I'm back in my bed.
All tucked in nice. But,
a few hours later. And that was the beginning of what I can recall as far as my abductions. My brother started having things happen to him, too, in a totally different location, in a house we were building in Sonora, California.
Yeah, they tend to come in clusters, these incidents. They come in, like Philip had a cluster of 3 in 3 or 4 days.
1982.
Yeah, he had...
Philip is your brother?
Yeah,
he was my brother, yes.
His younger brother.
Okay.
He's deceased now, but both boys, when they were young, were having disturbances and abduction experiences. And with Philip, his cluster of 3 was when he was 16. He awoke in the middle of the night to a two white lights shining brightly into his window, and his window was like there was a drop off, so the ground below was like 25 feet down. It was so something was floating up 25 feet in the air and shooting these bright white lights into his room. And there was no road back there. There's nothing, no explanation for it. And so as he started staring at the lights, trying to figure out what they could be, the next thing he knows, he blacks out and again wakes up hours later.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next night, he awoke to a scrabbling sound next to him on the floor, and he assumed it was one of his cats. So he reached down to pet the cat, and instead of a cat, a hand grabs his wrist, and he feels this thrill of adrenaline and fright, and still blacks out, which I thought was strange. It's definitely not like he's not rolling over and going back to sleep after feeling that adrenaline rush, you know. And then the third night, he awoke and looked over in his doorway of his bedroom, and there was a tall gray alien standing there staring at him. And he stared back at it for a few minutes, or moments, really, he said, and then blacked out again. So the blackout thing is very common with this phenomenon. And then Steve had a cluster of 5 where the whole family was involved.
Yeah, in 1979. Did we talk about this last time, Mike?
We probably did. We covered a lot of area. It's been a while though, so you can tell the
Oh,
story
okay,
again,
all
Steve.
right. So the first night, this was January of 1979. I was 18. The first night, my dad came to breakfast and said that his closet doors had opened and closed on him during the night. And my dad, a little quick background, my dad had been a bobby in England from 52 to 56. And also served in the military, and so he was a no-nonsense guy. Had a great sense of humor, and I was a cabinet maker with him. He was the master, I was the apprentice. So he told my sister and I that, and I just kind of just shrugged it off. Didn't think much of it.
Y'all had to go to work.
Went
anyway,
to work.
yeah.
Went to work. So the next night, during this time, I had just started studying Tai Chi, and I was very much into Paramahansa Yogananda's teachings. So I was reading one of his little books called Metaphysical Meditations, and I decided, hey, I think my dad would kind of enjoy this. So I went to the living room about 9 o'clock at night and gave him the book. So, should read some of his dad. And about 9:30, he came back into the room, my room, and with a puzzled look on his face, saying, "I'm hearing bells in the wall by the chimney." So myself, having been a musician, for most of my life, said, "Okay, Dad." So I went into the living room, and sure enough, there's this ding, ding, a silver bell being rung inside the wall by the chimney. And my dad and I looked at each other, banged on the wall, looked at the flue, nothing there. All right, so we got my sister, who was 13 at the time, and she came into the room, says, "Where's that bell coming from?" So we all heard the bell at the same time. And it went on for a good 10 minutes, and we banged on the wall, looked up the chimney again, try and make sense of it, right? Made no sense. And then it stopped, and we went to bed. So my brother and my mom were living in the house that we were building up in Sonora, California, 350 miles away in the foothills of the Sierras. So we would always call every morning to say hi, And my mom got on the phone, my dad, and said, "Jeffrey, strangest thing happened last night. I heard this bell ringing about 9:15 or so, and I picked up the phone, thought it was the phone, and there was this disembodied voice on the other end saying, 'I am the invisible Ambichi,' kind of a baritone voice, and she was trying to have a conversation with this person or entity, right? And so I got my brother on the phone. I said, "Philip," I said, "did the phone ring last night?" He said, "Well, I didn't hear it ring, but Mom definitely picked up the phone, and she was trying to have this conversation," happening exactly at the same time that we had heard the silver bell, 350 miles apart, 2 different locations. So the very next night, I was sleeping in my bed on the lower bunk this time, in my bedroom, and I was awakened by a whizzing sound in the ear, kind of that kind of sound. And so I just thought it was a fan or something like that. And I looked down the hallway. Light was on in the kitchen, so I could kind of see, but there was nothing there. So went back to bed and laying on my left side, and then the bed was pushed twice from the base, like gentle push from the foot of the bed. And, growing up in California, earthquakes, thought maybe it was a mild earthquake. So I tried to ignore it, and then it was a little stronger. And then the third time it was even stronger, like wake up. And then I got the tap, 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 like a bony index finger tapping on my mid-deltoid on my right side, like wake up. And at this point, I'm a combination of irritated, confused, and scared. Okay, so I just rolled over and just said, "What?" And I see this shimmery object or being that's like right in front of me, and I look at it, and then I blacked out. And so I told my dad and my sister about it. And at this point, we're just thinking, what the heck is going on here? All right, so the next night I decide I'm not sleeping in that bedroom. So I didn't. So I went to sleep in my work clothes, my cabinet maker's work clothes, and I slept on the sofa in the living room. And I awoke at about 5:30 in the morning, and I looked at my piano and I listened to the little fountain in the other room, and I thought, well, it's dark. I'm not going to get up yet. Nobody's up. So I just was laying there trying to go back to sleep. And then this entity, 25 feet behind me from the front door, kind of like came through the front door it was a tall, 6.5 foot tall, skinny being. Okay. And it was humanoid. And it brought with it this full wall of blue-white light with it. The whole room was filled with blue-white light. It kind of walked over to me. So it wasn't walking, but it was kind of floating, but upright. And it covered the 25 feet in, I guess, 1.5 to 2 seconds, stopped on my right side, and instantly the right side of my nervous system basically was like turned off. Okay. My eye was open, but I couldn't close it if I wanted to. And here I'm thinking,
Was it a
Yeah, like
paralysis?
numb and
it was
paralyzed.
it was not sleep paralysis, which is a big difference. I was totally awake and I could move if I wanted to before, but it was just basically my left side. I could still move if I wanted to, but I was totally awake. All right, so this entity basically it neutralized the right side of my body, bent down to my ear, and said very clearly into my ear, "Hi, Steve," in a neutral voice. Couldn't tell whether it was male or female.
So it knows his name.
But I could tell
Was it friendly?
the size. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Was it friendly?
It was a friendly. It wasn't like a "Hi, Steve."
Okay.
It was a "Hi, Steve."
Yeah.
Just basically like announcing itself. And I'm thinking, at this point, this is the family spirit guide called O'Glegley that had been with the family for at least 4 generations, that I'd heard that had appeared and even saved people's lives
Right.
at different times. So, but in this iteration of O'Glegley, he was 6.5 feet tall, skinny, humanoid, blue-white. Maybe the blue-white was the portal that he came through or whatever. But anyway, so I'm so excited. I'm thinking I'm going to get to talk and see O'Glegley. But the other half of me is saying, dude, you can't move. You're paralyzed. You can't do anything if you wanted to. And I'm just wanting to like look at its face. And I'm trying to look at his face and I get kind of an idea. It's, it's got the big eyes and it's got the humanoid kind of looking face. And then I guess, maybe after 5 or 10 seconds, it decided that maybe I was too scared or whatever its, purpose was. It unbent and then basically left, taking the blue-white light with it. And I can guarantee everybody there was not a UFO that had been parked in our front driveway because we had a couple of big trucks in the driveway. So it wasn't like a UFO that landed. So anyways,
Yeah.
and then I blacked out, of course.
And he didn't hear like the door open and shut.
No,
It's
no,
it seems more like they opened
nope.
a portal from a very
Right.
brightly lit place
So,
that,
anyways,
flooded the room.
yeah. So, when I woke up again after being blacked out, I told my sister and my dad about it. And again, we're just thinking, what is going to happen next, right? So, 30 that morning, my dad and I were getting hungry for lunch. So, I decided I was going to go down and get a bit of food for us. So, I reached into the pants pocket of the pants I'd been wearing that night, and I pulled out a bunch of coins. And these were just American coins from 1979 era, whatever, and every one you could pick up with each other. My dad could do it, I could do it. Just picking up, just like they're all magnetized, just
Yeah.
basically like they're all magnetic, which is impossible.
It's supposed to be
Okay,
impossible.
they're non-magnetic on purpose so that they
Yeah.
can go through vending machines and TSA. So anyway, so these
Yeah.
things, this is 6 hours after, all right?
So we think he was exposed during his abduction. We think he was exposed to some very powerful electromagnetic
It
field.
was
of
something,
some kind,
plasma or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And the following night was the last of the episodes, which I have no memory of whatsoever, but my dad does. My dad was awakened again in the middle of the night, let's say 2 o'clock in the morning, thereabouts, and he saw this intense wall of blue-white light that was encompassing all of my doorway, because our bedrooms were separated by a hallway, so we could see into each other's bedrooms, right? So he's seeing this blue-white wall of light, and he decided, being an ex-cop, what's all this then, from like Monty Python, and being from Britain, and he said, I'm gonna see what is going on, and so he was getting out of bed, as he says, and this voice inside his head, which is interesting, it wasn't in his ear, but it was in his head, like telepathy, saying, Jeffrey, just go back to sleep. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine. And that's exactly what he did. And he told me about it in the morning, and I had zero recollection of that. Okay. It happened, but I was, whatever they did, I don't have any memory of
And
that.
so,
Yeah.
what do you make of the blackouts? Like, this is a consistent occurrence every time these encounters
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
what you shared, Stephen, but also countless other people.
It's the
Right.
signature for
So,
the event. It's
what do you
definitely
think the
signature for it.
significance of that is? Is there a purpose behind that?
Oh, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
for men, they're probably taking our seat, or they're checking us out to see how we're doing. It's like a medical
Yeah.
checkup. And for women, it's either
They remove eggs,
they either
Yeah.
impregnate or they remove eggs. It's definitely it has all the markings of a very targeted medical or genetic experiment that is going on with
Yeah.
a purpose. There's a purpose behind it.
Can these characteristics be verified in a lab somewhere, like through testing, to know they've taken these
Well,
things from us?
Oh, you're talking about, I mean, as far as taking,
Yeah.
that's,
Taking the eggs, like Leslie said, like, can you verify that?
if they use, like with Betty Hill, they stuck a needle through her abdomen. So certainly there would be a needle puncture for people when they take. None of the women that Steve knows of in this family were taken, except maybe his mother. And we didn't get any testimony from her as far as did she get needle punctures at her.
Yeah.
But we know from other people who have been successfully regressed to find out what happens in those blackouts. In Stephen's case, we haven't been able to successfully regress him yet. That the memory block is just too well cemented in place, in his case,
Yeah.
but
I think what he was actually asking was, are there tests to say, okay, well, this wowoman had X amount of eggs?
Yeah, I was
no, I don't
pointing to
believe
that.
there's anything like that
No.
possible.
No, there's nothing like that
Yeah.
I've heard of. I mean, men's semen can vary, and sperm count can vary a lot, depending on
Yeah.
different circumstances. Even from the underwear that you wear
But we
to
think they
how
take
old
it
you are. So.
directly from the prostate in men's case. That's what the whole anal probe thing is all about, right? Is that they're accessing the prostate
Yeah.
directly.
Actually, the testicles.
Or wherever they're taking it, I guess. And women record, being sometimes sexually assaulted, and sometimes Sometimes uh, their children the fetuses are stolen, and
They're removed. They're
yeah,
removed, surgically removed. And see, that's the one thing that we do know. We do know that there's
yeah,
been numerous cases where obstetricians have done, your typical ultrasounds on women.
yeah,
They have confirmed that yes, you are pregnant. Yes, you have a healthy developing fetus. And almost always what ends up happening is about when the fetus develops to be about 5 centimeters or
yeah.
about the size of a baseball
About the 4 month
at about
mark.
4 months
Yeah,
exactly, the it mysteriously disappears. Okay,
Really?
everything is gone. The
and the
sac,
placenta,
everything,
everything, yeah,
everything
is
is
removed.
taken, and they're the obstetricians are just mystified because they know that she was pregnant, and that they know that there's no signs that she was ever pregnant. And this will happen to women sometimes 2, 3, maybe sometimes even four
Up to four
times.
times I've heard.
Okay,
Yeah,
so now that we have advanced, equipment to be able to visualize and to verify, so we know that it isn't like these fake pregnancies, like they said, oh, you're just filled with air and you weren't really pregnant. But now we know that something is going
yeah,
on, and nothing that we can do by modern techniques without doing invasive surgery can remove everything and basically take it out. And then they have to put it into some type of incubating system to finish growing
yeah.
the fetus.
And we've heard of vats that are set up with where witnesses have seen them in these underground bases where
Yes, sometimes.
the Dulce papers, the Dulce, New Mexico Air Force Base. This is what ufologists call it. It's an underground base under the Archuleta Mesa in New Mexico. We have testimony from two different whistleblowers on that. One of them, Phil Schneider, ended up being murdered. He died a really strange death. He wouldn't be quiet about it. He was going on like the speaker tour about what he had seen. And the next thing we know, he's with tubing wrapped around his neck, like, and they called it a suicide. It was
Rubber tubing.
yeah, which
A really
that's a
dumb
way.
way
That's a
to do it.
strange way to kill yourself, but So anyway, we think he was murdered, and this place that we're talking about, there was a second whistleblower, and he's responsible for creating what's called the Dulce Papers. And the Dulce Papers talk about where he was a security guard on the levels that were just human, but the bottom two levels of this base are human slash alien, bases. And when he snuck down to one of the lower levels that he wasn't cleared for, and he saw all these vats with aliens in them, or hybrid beings that looked like aliens and human hybrids
Star children or whatever. Yeah.
in growing in these vats in various levels of development. So
Like the Matrix?
yeah, kind of like
Yeah,
that.
kind of like that. Yeah.
Except they were vertical standing things, not
Wow.
like lying down sideways. But yeah, so. And he drew some sketches of him, and the Dulce Papers are making the rounds in the ufology community.
Except they didn't have all the tubes stuck in them, that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
Like we see in the movies.
Right? Yeah.
So what are they doing? Are they researching us? Why are they taking this
Well,
DNA
there
and
are
stuff?
there are a couple of theories on that.
Yeah.
One is that they're trying to. There's the one that the Greys. There's a couple main theories. One of them is that the Greys can't really live here on the surface without kind of creating a hybrid
Mhm.
of themselves. They're kind of like a dying off race. We personally think that.
We think it's our theory that the Nordic aliens are actually a branch of humanity
Yeah.
that split away from us thousands of years ago.
Right. And
12,000,
we discussed that last
850.
time you guys
Yeah.
were here. Yeah.
And so, in the case of their program, we think they're just trying to integrate with us again. Now, is the purpose of this? Is it for eventual reintegration of our two races, or is it like an infiltration program? I think it's infiltration. I think they're they're not happy with our barbaric behaviors, and they're trying to change us subtly from the inside out, I believe. So we think they're
And that's
living among us,
that's arguable, right? I
Oh,
mean,
oh, pardon, Mike.
barbaric behavior. No, I was just going to say that's plausible,
Yeah.
right? Like barbaric behavior, humanity's not always well behaved. We see
Yeah.
that in the news every day.
We're seldom well behaved. In fact,
Yeah.
every once in a while we'll get like a little bit of a breather between wars. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, we're basically the seven deadly sins that we supposedly inherited from our quote unquote gods. We have that in spades. I mean, it's
And-
just not getting any better.
A firm
If you
believer
believe
in
the-
sin. I mean, I believe that firmly.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe the meeting that took place between Admiral Byrd and the Nordic aliens, we believe that's who we met with, was the Nordics. They said that normally we try and have nothing to do with you surface people and your barbaric wars. So I think that's how they think of us, as barbarians. But because we had learned to crack the atom, they had to make an exception, and they had to start trying to communicate with us, because they felt it was a power we shouldn't be messing with.
Yeah,
And,
I tend to agree.
yeah, me too.
So prior to the invention of nuclear technology, was there never any encounters?
Oh no, there have been encounters
Yeah.
throughout. Even Columbus reported encounters.
And we think the incubus stories of the 1600s are actually alien abduction events. They're, a woman would claim to be raped by an alien, or not an alien,
No,
but like
spirit,
a demon.
a demon.
Yeah, and then be impregnated and start to show and start to have the symptoms of being pregnant, and then give birth to nothing but air. And so that's like we think that sounds like possibly they've been doing abductions for a pretty long time on us.
And that morphed into the vampire. The vampire is very much an alien abduction. Vampire is everything what you talk about in alien abduction. They come at night. They're very powerful.
They paralyze
you.
somehow,
They take your blood,
extract DNA,
extract DNA, and they can change shape.
and they come back many times to the same victim, which is the sort of the case too.
It's almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that's where we think these two mythos arose.
They cross over.
Yeah.
So the end game is to integrate us to them.
I think so. I think they're trying to make us less barbaric over time, and I don't know how well they're succeeding with that.
I think they're doing a pretty piss poor job, quite frankly.
Indeed.
I really do. I mean,
You're challenging them to step it up, are you?
yeah.
Steve?
I'm telling them if you're going to do it,
Chop, chop.
do it quickly. I think this whole thing of seeing maybe more drones is it's a lot of it. It is us, okay. But some of the other ones that just don't behave like drones are definitely not ours.
Yeah, you have to apply, just like with all UFO sightings, you have to apply the observable characteristics to them.
Right.
Like, there's like 6 observable characteristics of UFOs that if it shoots away at supersonic speed, instantaneous supersonic speed, then that's one of them, right? And so if these orbs that people are seeing, the orbs, I think, are what our cousins, we call them, are using as spy drones. And when those orbs behave like a UFO, where it shoots away at supersonic speed or has high-speed angular turns, impossible, to achieve with our normal thrust technology, And then if they disappear right in front of you, or if they plunge into the ocean and speed away.
Yeah, transmedium.
Yeah. You guys talked about that last time. And so, Leslie, describe what the orbs are exactly physically if we were to see one.
Well, they were described rather well by the Navy pilot Ryan Graves on the house floor. And he described them as 15-foot diameter spheres. They appear to be glass spheres. We don't think they're made out of glass, but that's what they look like. And inside there's a cube of, it's either black or dark gray material. And so they can't be a manned craft. right? Unless the aliens are this tall, or
No, they're
whatever.
not manned. No.
But so we think that they're usually, we see them a lot, and they make up about 52% of UFO sightings.
Oh, that's
So
the Nordics.
they're very no, they're both 52% as it happens, but they make up about 52% of UFO sightings are these orbs, and we think when they hover in place, we think this cube inside spins, and that's what gives them this kind of flickering appearance that you see in all the Instagram videos when they're people are shooting them up in the sky.
My brother was actually attacked by orbs. That way, we
that's another
probably
weird
didn't talk
thing.
about that on the last show.
Yeah, tell them about that. That was
What
bizarre.
happened?
Yeah, he was in his early 30s at the time, I believe it was. And
Yeah,
it
like
was one
35.
of the houses. He built one house, and then there was the house that he built with my dad. And he would get visited in the night by these orbs, one or two orbs that would show up on his landing on his second story deck. And
Yeah.
he just got the courage one night, like about 1 o'clock in the morning, to go out and just to confront the orb. It was maybe about baseball
Yeah.
size, he said.
Grapefruit, I think,
Yeah,
is how he
grapefruit,
described it to me.
grapefruit,
Yeah.
whatever. And he just looked at it, and they looked at each other kind of, and then it rushed him and went through him. This orb just actually went through him. And it just happened to be that my wife and I, Leslie, happened to be visiting up in the area the very next day. And he told us about this, and
Yeah, he pointed to the
What was your
Yeah.
first reaction when he told
well,
you
he
that?
pointed to the back of his neck, and he kind of turned towards me, and I could see where he was pointing, and it was bruised there. There was a round bruise right where he said this UFO came out.
Yeah,
of it,
and my first reaction was my number one. My brother was not one for fits of fancy. Okay, he
Yeah.
taught calculus at a college level just as a side job for fun
Yeah.
to make extra money. I
He
mean,
was
he
a
was
brilliant man.
he
but-
was very intelligent. He was very very down to earth. I mean, he was an engineer, draftsman, that kind of stuff. So when my brother told me this, it was like I'm just I'd seen enough stuff in the family as it was, so I wasn't going to say, "Oh, come
Yeah.
on, man, you're
Yeah.
just dreaming,"
Yeah.
But then when he showed me
Yeah.
the physical proof, I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
So it's like I'd seen enough stuff. My brother and I both saw the little gnomes, the garden gnomes, I called them, at the house that we grew up in.
Yeah.
It
Both
was
boys
like
saw.
I was 8 years old. I started sleeping in the top of the bunk bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night, always in the middle of the night, and I just happened to
Yeah.
roll over, and I saw these like 4 or 5, literally, foot and a half tall gnomes that were walking into the room, kind of looking around, and they were kind of shimmery, but I cleared my eyes and I looked at them, and then they noticed that I saw them. They kind of stopped and kind of looked at me, and then I got scared and I rolled back over, and then they went away. So when my brother, when he turned 8, he started sleeping in the closet, and he slept in our closet for 2 full years. And I asked Phil,
'Cause of
for
fear?
2 years he slept in the closet at nighttime for bed. And
Because he was
I
scared?
said, Philip, why are you sleeping in the closet? He said, well, I'm afraid of the little men who come at night. And, because I had seen the little men when I was 8 years old, and he was 6 years younger than me at the time, but when he turned 8, he started seeing the little men.
I'd like to point out that we don't actually believe in little garden gnomes.
No.
But when the family would describe having a memory, and they would describe it as shimmery or twinkly, and I get the feeling that this is memory tampering.
Yes.
When people have abductions, sometimes they can remember dribs and drabs of the abduction. But when it comes to the face of their abductor, remembering who is doing this to you, frequently the memory will be altered or tampered with. I think like they'll see them as gnomes, or owls are described frequently, and
Yeah, it's what the person's brain development at the time, their emotional development, and what they're willing to take without being scared out of their mind. I can just imagine that when I was 8 years old, if I saw a 6.5 foot tall gray alien walking into my room when I was 8 years old, it would have scared the crap out of me, But
6.5. I'd be scared at 50.
yeah, really.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. So
Yeah,
and
no joke.
it's no joke. So when I saw little garden gnomes that appeared shimmery, kind of little shimmery, that was something that, okay, I wasn't going to be afraid of, but I wasn't going to know why the heck they were there in the
Right.
first place. But at least it wasn't going to
Yeah.
terrify me. But when my brother, I think he just saw them more than I did, because he was on the bottom of the bunk bed, and he reacted in a different way. He just reacted, but he wouldn't talk about it. My brother, we didn't talk about this stuff openly in the family. It was one of these things that we knew about, had been
Yeah.
with the family for multiple generations, from Germany to England to California.
Finally, we had to sit
Four
everybody
different
down
four different bloodlines that we know of.
and
Okay.
extract all their stories out of them.
Is this something?
Now, why was it so quiet? Were you all terrified? Did you think someone was going to think you were crazy? Like, what was the
There are a lot
reason
of
you didn't
reasons. Like I
discuss it?
didn't, I almost never told anybody at school. I mean, especially in elementary school, they either think that you're lying, that you're crazy, or you're living
Yeah.
in a haunted house. It's just something you just
Yeah.
don't talk about. My mom, we knew my mom.
Mhm.
Everybody knew my mom did automatic writing. Okay, that was a known thing, and she was
Yeah.
very good at it, and she was actually real about it. I mean,
Automatic writing?
It's where
Yeah,
you go into trance
What
and
is
your
that? Sorry, what
hand
is that?
writes by itself, kind of. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
She always felt compelled. When she felt compelled, she had to go and just had to write.
And this spirit guide who was in communication with
Old
her, we
Glegley.
call him Old Glegley in the family, but we've come to believe that Old Glegley is a tall gray alien, and he's been like the family's handler for many generations. And
Right.
they do this. They look for a certain genetic line of people, and when they find one that they really like, they'll prey on that family for generations. And the fact that it's almost entirely a Caucasian phenomenon made us first start looking into the possibility that we're dealing with a Caucasian branch of humanity here, because
Right.
there's also that hair of the alien story. We talked about it last time, where a guy found, was set while he was paralyzed by two hybrid alien women, and they left these hairs in his bed, and he got them analyzed, and um, yeah, the hairs test out as human, but a bizarre mixture of human, but also that it's a mutated person, because the hair is perfectly clear, and there is no known human hair type. So that kind of goes a long way to backing up our theory that this is a branch of humanity that's been separated from us for thousands of years. And I think they're trying to reintegrate with us. And whether it's for infiltration or eventual reintegration of our two, people, essentially, I don't really know. I think they are kind of fighting for disclosure sometimes, and then sometimes they don't.
One thing we've come to the conclusion of from our research is that we are the ones that don't want the disclosure at this point.
And it's our
They
government.
are the ones that have
keeping it
been
under
trying to
wraps,
fight for it, and they tried to communicate with us back in 1942. Was it January of 1942?
Yeah.
The Battle
Right
of Los
after Pearl Harbor,
Battle of Los Angeles, which is well documented, where we shot 1,500 rounds of munitions at their spaceship. We know that they met with Eisenhower on a couple different occasions.
Yeah, that's in your book, right?
And of course, it was.
I swear I read that
in Nordic. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a Nordics that met with Eisenhower. Valiant Thor was also a Nordic. The people that Admiral Byrd met with under the ice sheet at the city, under the ice sheet in Antarctica, were Nordics.
They call themselves the Ariani, and because of the destruction of the Great Flood, we think this is what drove them underground in the first place. And so they didn't lose their technology, where all us people left on the surface, most of us died out, but the few that were left behind after the cataclysm, where they were shoved back into the Stone Age and had to start over from scratch.
It's like the show Alone. Have you ever watched the show Alone? Exactly. Yeah, that's
I
what
haven't,
we would.
no.
That's what we would have to do. Basically, figure out how to make snares
Get food again.
and get
Yeah,
food and
exactly.
get water
Yeah.
and build a shelter. That's basically what
Yeah.
we'd have to do. We'd have to go back because we lost our technology. Now, when it comes to the Greys, we have a couple different theories.
Yeah.
One of the theories is that we've heard also too that the Greys have been here longer than we have. Okay, that's one of them. And
Mhm.
then when we went underground, and there's multiple different stories about races going underground. The Tuatha De Danann.
Yeah.
There's many different ones where we always seem to seek underground because the surface is a dangerous place. I mean, we get hit by
Mhm.
comets and meteors a lot more frequently than people realize, and they are
Mhm.
game changers. Okay, so there's a combination of theories that the Greys seem to be inherently telepathic, and
Yeah.
telepathy is actually the simplest way of communicating. Okay, it's
But
the
they
most
also
basic
behave.
way.
They behave like robots, kind of.
Right.
They,
Mhm.
and so we're not really sure if we think that maybe at some point the Nordics discovered these Greys living underground,
Correct. Correct.
and again, a branch of humanity that broke away, but thousands and upon
A
thousands of
long
years
time
ago.
before we did. Yes.
And you're saying this started at like I'm a Bible guy. I'm a
Right.
Christian. So the Great
Right.
Flood. You're talking Noah.
Yes.
Right.
And there's like
Okay.
1,200
Okay.
Noah
So.
stories around the world. All they're in
Mhm.
the different cultures. 1,200 separate cultures
Mhm.
with a flood myth in their most ancient
Yeah.
lore. So
Right. Right.
we definitely think we're looking at a worldwide shared event of some kind.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of proven
Yeah.
recently when they discovered that the Younger Dryas comet struck Lake Superior area in 12,850 years ago. And a comet
Mhm.
is, it was 62 miles wide when it came into
Mhm.
the atmosphere, and they're dirty snowballs. So what happens is they break apart, and they get all these air bursts in front of them, and that caused
Mhm.
there's a layer of soil called the Uccello horizon that shows a layer of charcoal where almost all the forests of the northern hemisphere were on fire at the same time.
Right.
And after that, it's 1,000 years of climate upheaval laid down after that, called the
Mhm.
Younger Dryas cooling period, where we were kind of
Mhm.
plunged back into an ice age
Yeah, we
again.
were coming out of the ice age. We went back into one because of that
Yeah.
event. Right.
So the people on the surface have to revert back to hunter
And we
gatherers
were,
to
and there was
survive.
the genetic bottleneck that was found too. That we were reduced to about 1,000 surface
10,000
individuals.
individuals.
10,000.
Yeah.
10,000 about that time too. So
We're not
Mhm.
genetically diverse enough. It doesn't make any sense to
Right.
geneticists unless you look at a population bottleneck, which they discovered.
right. So
Finally,
Now population bottleneck. What do you
it's
mean by
when the
that exactly?
population is drastically reduced, from
Mhm.
however many before the impact of the comet. We
Mhm.
don't know the population of Earth before
so certain
13,000 years ago, but
so they find certain
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
characteristics and certain traits um, would have been selectively because of the bottleneck. There's certain things for survival that would be selected out. Like for
Yeah.
instance, telepathy and other things like that wouldn't necessarily have been needed, but the ability to be strong and to be in survival mode. So in other words, like human beings, probably telepathy was a lot more of a normal thing, and
Yeah.
sensitivity was a lot more of a normal thing
we think our
prior to the
cousins
flood.
kept the ability.
Yeah, our cousins did.
Whereas it is a human trait, we believe, but that it's atrophied in us. But their cousins have not let it atrophy in them. So that's why they can communicate telepathically with each other and with us. But when we were doing the Kundalini raising practices of chanting and deep meditation and astral projection, we became more and more and more telepathic. So we think it's actually like I say, a human birthright, and that it's just a matter of keeping it up with teaching your children how to be more open from the beginning.
There's so many things that are working against us right now. I mean, in society. I mean, the ability to slow the brain waves down to about 8 cycles per second, 8 to 10 cycles per second is what you need to be able to actually do proper meditation. And things such as, for like astral projection, you got to get down to about 2 to 4 brainwave cycles per second. It's, we're living in a society where we're sitting our kids down at the age of 2 in front of computer screens that are make your brain go at 40 cycles per second, and you start thinking in nanobytes.
Most
So
adults are
we're
moving at that
basically
speed
going,
too.
Yeah,
yeah,
not just the kids.
right. So yeah, so we're basically short circuiting our brains, and we're getting away from. That's why I think our cousins, they find is kind of disgusting in a way, that they can't communicate. It's like trying to communicate with a kid that's got Tourette's syndrome,
Yeah.
when you basically have you're like a normal person that has a normal way of communicating. You're trying to communicate with somebody with Tourette's, that they're just basically unpredictable. They can't hold a thought for more than a few seconds.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you think about a culture that kept the ability to have telepathy. What
Yeah.
kind of culture? How different that would be.
they're physically
Yeah,
very similar
and strands
to us.
of
They must
hair have
be
been
because they're
found,
breeding
even though
with
it's a
us,
bit different. It's still similar.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
it's still human hair,
If you
right?
can, if you know what the person's thinking, okay, in a culture where everybody can tell what everybody's thinking,
Yeah, how different would that make their culture?
if you know that somebody's got murderous thoughts, you're going to select them and say, okay, this person is dangerous. But it's going to be a different way. The kindness and the gentleness and some of the other traits would be selected in
Yeah.
favor of that.
You'd weed out
you know,
antisocial
But
people
if you're
pretty
living in a
quick, you know?
culture where everybody is telling lies and keeping secrets, and you don't really know what is going on, it's just a totally different culture. They probably really find us abhorrent.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I find us abhorrent.
I think the
never
same
mind.
thing.
Never mind what they think. Yeah, and I want to throw something at you guys because this is fascinating. As I said, I'm a Christian. I believe in the Bible, the Word of God. That's what I go to, and I always try to reconcile things I don't understand about civilization, humanity, human history, even science to an extent with what's written in the Bible. And the Bible doesn't it doesn't answer every single question. That's obvious, but I want to ask you guys, is there enough physical evidence to verify all these things that we're discussing today? And the reason I ask is I believe in a spirit realm. I believe there is demonic presence that attacks humans, that creates terror.
We think it comes from the astral realm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible that this is a spiritual encounter and not physical, and not these Nordics or these Greys as you're describing them?
Fair enough, because they do exert a certain amount of control over their abductees through the psychic realm too. It's definitely a psychic phenomenon, and I do think that sometimes their communication happens without physically being taken. And we think that after time, after a person gets older and starts to pollute their body with, I don't know, preservatives, and alcohol and whatever else, I think we become less, where they want us less physically, you know what I mean? And that's when they start taking the kids instead, right? Because the kids are
Sort
they're
of, not
healthier,
so much
exactly,
these days, but
healthier
yeah.
specimens, But they exert their influence for the rest of their lives. Like Stephen is still being influenced in the astral realm, and
Right.
and then there's a whole different phenomenon that comes from the astral realm, which we think from lower levels of existence, that you'll get these demonic presences that attack people and haunt people.
Yeah, that stuff's real. I believe that 100%.
That's a real thing too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's also real. But as an example, have you ever given blood, Mike?
I don't think I have.
All right. Well, if you ever do give blood, you'll have to fill out. They'll ask you a ton of questions. Have you had HIV? Do you currently have HIV? Have you lived with a person who had HIV? Have you ever had hepatitis? There are all these different ways that they try and screen you from giving blood. Okay. And I give blood 5 times a year. because it actually extends a person's life, especially a man's life, because when you get to a certain amount of deciliters as far as iron in your blood, you get above 20, it starts to give you a lot more chance for arterial sclerosis.
Interesting. I didn't know
So
that. Steve, you always drop
it,
these nuggets of health wisdom. I love it. You did that last time.
well, I try to. This comes
Yeah.
from a Swedish study or Swiss.
Yeah.
But what they do, they try and find ways to screen you out. Like if you've had this or this or this, traveled out of the country recently, there's going to be all these things you have to answer. Otherwise, they won't take your blood. Okay.
Right.
So if you're on a bunch of different medications, they won't take your blood. So it's the
Yeah.
same thing with what we call our cousins. As we get, when you're younger, you tend to be, a little less polluted. Hopefully.
Yeah, you're not
I mean,
taking Lipitor and
I wasn't taking any medications at the
Right.
age of 18, and it was a different time in 1979, totally different time. No cell phones.
Mhm.
It was a lot healthier time. So I think that,
towards that they're not aliens coming here from distant star systems, because if they had an interest in human DNA, sure, why not? But why a certain race only? Or almost entirely a certain race.
And going back really quickly to old Glegley, my uncle, who wasn't a Shaw or a Rowe, but he's a Griffiths, okay? But he was married to my mother's older sister.
Still a family member.
Right. So still a family member. So when he was in his very early 20s, he was a pilot in the RAF, just post World War II, and he was stationed in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. And my uncle became a very wealthy man, a great guy. You could sit down talking about anything, okay? Very level-headed. Grew up in World War II as a child. So anyways, so he was stationed in Ceylon in this multi-man tent, okay? And he was awakened by this tall, 6.5-foot tall, skinny figure in the middle of the night wearing a hat. This was wearing a hat this time, and woke my uncle up, specifically just him, and said, "Douglas, you need to get up right now." Says, "You will be attacked. There is a raiding party coming. You must leave." And he knew about O'Glegley. He'd heard about O'Glegley from my grandmother and whatever. And so he got out of the tent, and about a minute and a half later, a raiding party came through with machetes and with guns and killed a number of the officers. And he recounted this story to me on a couple different occasions when I was in my teens.
Yeah. So we think they prey on the family and they protect the family too.
So anyway, so the end of the story is that when his daughter turned of age where she could drive, he bought her this nice white Triumph, which is, of course, a little sports car from England. And I don't know if you remember the story, but the license plate was O'Glegley. Okay.
Yeah, I think he was
He
grateful.
gave her. Okay. So again, if it's just the spirit realm, what is the interest? The interest was that Douglas had to survive because he had to have a daughter, and he was important to
the family,
the Shaw with the Rowe bloodline because he was a Griffiths, okay? But he took this seriously. I mean, he took it absolutely seriously. He didn't really believe it until it happened to him, okay?
And then this automatic writing that the women do.
All the women,
it
apart
goes
from one.
back in his family like 4 generations.
Mhm.
And Karen, his sister, she didn't really want to do it. She tried it a few times and didn't like it that much, and never practiced it regularly. But then after her mother passed away, she started getting more and more the urges to do it, and now she's.
And what are they
regularly
writing when that
automatic
happens?
writing
What
again.
kind of
It's
things are
I
being
think
written?
It's communications from old Glegley, like the alien handler that's handling the family is.
As an
It's
example,
a way of
yeah.
communicating with the family.
Wow.
As a reminder, when my mom picked me up when I was 9 years old from elementary school, and she was crying her eyes out, and my mom was one of these people that didn't really show emotion that much.
Stoic,
Right?
very stoic.
Right. But anyway, so she was crying, which is uncharacteristic. I said, "Mommy, what's wrong?" She said, "Well, my mom just died." Well, my grandmother was in northern England at the time, and that's where they lived, and we barely had a phone in 1969, just a standard dial phone. And I said, "Well, did you get a call?" She says, "No, I automatic wrote. I had
Old
to
Gleglies,
automatic
yeah,
write,
told her.
and
Yeah.
I was told that she fell down cobblestone stairs and she died
Hmm.
from the fall. And so I believed her, but my dad came home from work and he knew about Oglekli, so he said, "Okay, but we haven't had a call yet, so we didn't believe 100%, right?"
Hmm.
But
But then official word finally
my
arrived. Yeah.
mom was not a person to to lie about this kind of stuff, right? So
Yeah.
anyways, a day later, we get a call from England that her mother had died. Her mother had died from a fall down cobblestone stairs and died from the complications. And this happened when her father died, and this happened when Uncle Clifford died, and numerous other occasions. I've even found some of her automatic writing, which is not her handwriting at all.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's just a different type of style of writing, and it will be information there that she has no way of knowing.
Sometimes they
Okay,
use their opposite hand
I
too,
used
which is
my right hand
strange.
instead of my left. I tried it a few times.
Mhm.
I got this creepy feeling that came over me, like I was being partly possessed. And I do my automatic writing through my music. I sit down at the piano or whatever, and I'll get a feeling that I need to write something.
They'll
And
kind of just channel the
I'll just
music through
channel
his
the
hands.
music that
Yeah.
way. That to me is comfortable, but I personally I don't like it myself. It feels like a type of semi
Possession.
possession,
Yeah.
and it just creeps me out. So I
Yeah, and all that stuff you guys, like not all that stuff, but just some of the stuff you guys described, just we went back to the demonic, right? And
Yeah.
it sounds, some of it sounds like that, and so it's just fascinating to try to reconcile between
I'm
that
working on that
and
myself. Like what are these black-eyed children? They always seem very evil, malevolent when people see them and describe them. But where they don't do that with aliens, right? It's you don't get a sense of actual demon or demonic like a
yeah.
malevolence to them.
Yeah, and my uncle's life being saved. I mean, that was certainly not
Yeah,
demonic.
right. We
So that was
appreciated
not at all. My
that.
life being saved on April 1st, 1992 at the
Right.
beach, that was certainly
Uh,
not demonic.
yeah,
That's
this
for
bizarre,
sure.
this lifeguard
Came out of
performs
nowhere.
this miraculous rescue of Stephen and then vanishes just off the beach, this long,
Hmm.
skinny beach where there's
Yeah.
nowhere to
I remember
go,
very clearly,
just,
April 1st,
you were a kid?
1992.
Oh, you no, in 92. Okay. You
Yeah,
were an adult.
1992. I was 31 at the time.
Uh-huh.
And I decided to go out. The Pacific Ocean is cold. People
Oh, I
think
know.
it's warm, but the Pacific Ocean
the
out here
current comes down
is
from
cold.
Alaska.
So it was
Yeah.
down in the 50s at least. Okay, I went
Yeah.
out there just without a bodysuit. Just I used to go, body surfing a bit. So
It's a cold plunge when you go in
it's
that
a cold
ocean.
Yeah.
plunge. Yeah,
It
especially
is.
April 1st.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
cold,
I
right?
can't even
So
imagine.
I went out there and I just was like, riding the waves, that kind of stuff. With there were a couple other guys out there, right? And then I started noticing they started going in, and so I said maybe I should go in too, right? And I was starting to feel cold. I was already cold, right? But I'm swimming, and I guess I was in kind of a partly like a riptide, because I was swimming, but I wasn't making any headway. And then all of a sudden, it was the only time in my life where I lose all sensation in both arms. My arms just basically become like lead. It must have been a circulation problem or something, but I couldn't move my arms. I could barely lift them. And I'm thinking, I think I'm going to drown.
The first stages of hypothermia.
I'm fairly far out, right? I'm fairly far out. And so I happened to notice that there's Lifeguard by the Lifeguard tower. The towers are kind of back on the beach, right? They're kind of back on the beach, right? So there's two or three girls there that are obviously flirting with him, right? And I'm quite a bit out there, and so I yelled, "Help!" And of course, they couldn't hear me because of the waves. And then I yelled, "Help!" a little louder. Then the third time I said, "I gotta yell as loud as I can, otherwise I'm dead," right? So I yelled as loud as I could. And finally, somebody, I got their attention,
He turns
got,
and looks at him.
got the lifeguard's attention. And then I just basically go under. I can't keep myself up anymore. And I'm about 6 feet under, literally, okay? And I'm looking up at the sun. I start to see the light, okay? I literally start to see the white light, and I'm just holding my breath, and I'm thinking, oh, this isn't going to be so bad. I'm going to die, but it ain't going to be so bad. And somehow, in the waves, being that far out, this lifeguard found me. All of a sudden, as I'm about ready, within about 1 or 2 seconds of taking my breath, right? I basically can't hold my breath any longer. And this arm just reaches down out of nowhere and just grabs me and pulls me up. And then he says, just relax, sir. I'm going to get you back to safety. So he puts me in the, the arm across the neck thing when you're on your back. And he has this little boogie board with him, right? Which helped. So then he got me in, and I can barely get out of the water. My arms, I still can't move. My ex-wife wasn't sympathetic at all. Okay.
She's
all right?
mad at
That's
him,
why.
you know,
That's
like,
why she's your
"You
ex-wife.
idiot."
That's
Right.
why she's your ex-wife.
Yeah,
right?
that's right, exactly. That's why she's my ex-wife. Right. And so, after like a minute or two, I want to go and thank this lifeguard, right? And I can't find him.
He was the
it's
guy
just-
sitting on the lifeguard
He's
seat,
gone.
Yeah.
but it was the same guy
The
that was
same
flirting with the
guy.
girls.
Yeah, but he's not there. He would have gone back and flirted with the girl. So I saved somebody's life. No, he is gone.
But they
And,
change
he
shifts
didn't check on the
sometimes.
guy he
Disappeared.
just rescued either.
Just
like,
disappeared.
that's kind of strange, right? Are you sure you're okay, sir?
Yeah.
Would have been nice, right? But no.
But the thing is, he went from that lifeguard tower. He moved about 150 feet in about 2 seconds. I
That's
don't think
crazy.
even-
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
Michael Phelps could have done that on his
No.
best day.
And on the Pacific, this was the Pacific Ocean, right? So on
Yeah,
the Pacific
Nicholas
coast,
Canyon Beach.
those lifeguard towers are far enough back, right? At least in the
Yeah,
LA area.
right.
right at the
yeah.
right at the
Yeah.
right at the back. Right,
yeah,
right at the
they're not
back.
near the water, so that's a good run just to get to the water.
It's he had to run through the sand, then he had to jump into the water, and he had to get on his boogie board, and then he had to find me. Okay, I was in the waves. I wasn't. I was so far out that I couldn't touch. I probably was 10 feet from the bottom before I could touch the bottom. So I couldn't like jump off the bottom and come back up, and then nothing like that. It was just like what he did was superhuman.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was just not meant to die on that day. Honestly, I was not meant to die.
I
That's
that's a wild story, Stephen. Thank you for sharing
it's
that.
a
And
true story.
I believe you. I believe you. And I have so many more questions, but we're out of time.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have to do a part 3. I hope you guys will come
Okay.
back because I love having you guys
Okay.
on
Sure.
and
I'll give you my theories about where demons are coming from.
okay.
We'll do it next time. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. Now real quick, plug your show on Gnostic TV.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you can see it by going just to gnostictv.com. And it's called Abductions 101, UFOs and the Paranormal Connection. And we're trying to, figure out the whole connected problem. Because, we think there's a connection between all the cryptids and our cousins, too. We think, and so that's, we're exploring how hauntings affect it, and demonology as well. So we think there's a lot of connections between all of these phenomena, or most of them. Somehow a connection between them.
Yeah,
So,
my sister and her husband do it's called ghostly locations.
ghostly locations. They're
in,
doing ghost
in
hunting
northern
in
in northern Great Britain. They've been doing that for a few years now.
Scottish castles and stuff. But and then our book is again who they are and what they're up to. And our you can follow us on Instagram, and if you have questions, feel free to direct message us there. And that's leslie.shaw.author.
Okay, and we'll make
Yeah.
sure to include that in the show notes. Leslie and Stephen
Thanks.
Shaw, thanks for being here. You guys are great, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for having us again, Mike.
That'll do it for this edition. We are out of here. Now tell us if you've ever had a UFO encounter or an alien encounter or some kind of encounter that you could not make sense of. We want to hear from you guys. Drop us a comment and always check us out at mikecpodcast.com. Until next time, bye everybody.